last meeting.
Give me one more minute. Sorry, I was just asking how we were doing.
Oh, okay.
You all set?
Yeah.
You all set? We're good? All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Colchester Planning Commission. It is 7:07, December 17th. The first item on our agenda for tonight will be the public hearing on the development regulations for supplement 42, which I'd like to open at this time. Do you have any discussions, concerns, changes we'd like to hear?
Anybody here to speak on it? Come forward to the microphone.
Anybody like to speak? Please come right up to the microphone. On supplement 42.
That's not us.
Rich, is this going to be the public hearing first? Or
Supplement 42. We'll get down to, that's number 4 down. Yep.
The comment's not needed. Oh. Sorry.
You're okay. Some comments on that? We're all good?
No public comments on supplement 42. This is the proposed changes to the development regulations. There are a couple of copies in the back table.
Everybody's happy? Board's all happy? All right. So we'll close the public hearing on the development regulations for supplement 42.
I had just a couple of
No.
questions. I'm sorry.
No,
Oh,
we can do that
after
on,
the close of the public hearing.
yep, and then we'll make a motion. Sound good? All right, so what we'd like to do now, we'll make a motion, if that's
Okay.
okay. We'll have a motion made, if I could, to approve supplement 42, the
Okay.
select board. We can do that if you'd like now, then we'll have a discussion on it.
Okay, I think I just needed some clarification.
Oh, that's all right, go ahead and make a motion for the,
Oh, make
There
a
you go.
motion to accept it?
yeah,
Okay, I move to accept the supplement to
42.
42.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, so now we'll have a discussion.
And was there a motion made to close the public hearing?
Oh, I thought there was,
Wait,
I'm
Did I
sorry.
make a motion to close it?
There we go. We
Okay,
have a
let's
motion.
close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
There you
Sorry, this is your first supplement. You're doing a good job at it. You guys haven't had a public hearing like this put together as a group yet.
Not yet.
Good.
So I just had a couple of questions about the footprint lots. Can you help me understand that? I'm just not clear when you talk about footprint lots.
Sure, so a little bit about the history about footprint lots
Yep.
is, and just a brief history, and I apologize, I don't think you were here when I sort of went over why the need to have a definition for footprint lots. So, in 2008, after the financial crisis, the banks became a lot more restrictive with financing, and particularly with condos. There were issues about ownership and who owned the land and what have you. So the sort of workaround that a lot of developers have gone to are footprint lots, where you own the land underneath your unit. Now, under our current PUD regulations, there's lot size minimums that you can't technically create these. They have been created as a matter of the PUDs, but we haven't officially recognized them. And so I think we needed to call out and say, here are footprint lots. They exist for financing reasons and for property transfer purposes, but they're not for zoning purposes for you to take setbacks from lot coverage, what have you. So we're legitimizing them a bit more, so it's a bit clear about the distinctions of what's a footprint lot versus an actual lot, if that makes sense.
Great. The other question I had was with the seawalls. I didn't notice anything in there in terms of, well, maybe it's in there and I didn't see it, but just that the seawall should blend in with the natural surroundings. So it's
That's already in the
Okay.
regulations, so what you saw is just that portion that's changing of the regulations with regard to seawall.
not, yeah,
There is already language about preserving the natural shoreline,
yeah,
and I think it's 7.03F, maybe 4. But the only language that we're proposing to change to the seawalls is to clarify an existing practice.
okay.
We've been requiring that the engineer that's in charge of, well, first of all, you have to have engineered plans on a seawall. And we've been requiring that engineer to be at 50% completion check-in to make sure that the wall isn't deviating. And then we're also requiring them to certify at the end. This has been a matter of practice with the Mungeon seawall. That was how we sort of ran into the fact that there was no longer an engineer on board with that when we went to do a 50% completion, and there was no engineer present. So it's formalizing that process that we've had in place to make sure that things are going as per the plans.
Okay. And the only other thing was, it was Article 8, page 1. It was an accessory to an on-farm business, and that was in A, and then at B, what's excluded was agriculture and horticulture uses. So I'm just wondering,
So what page are you on?
I'm on page 1 of Article 8. Sorry, sir, I should have emailed you. So there's A and B. And I think we're adding on accessory of on-farm business.
Yes, we are.
And then, but it says in B, number 3, what's excluded is agriculture and horticulture uses. And I just didn't know if that was congruent, they were both congruent with each other.
So a little bit of background on that is during the last legislative session, there was a widening of, or an opening up in terms of on-the-farm businesses, particularly with wedding venues and things of that nature, that are now allowed, that are sort of beyond what we've considered agricultural and horticultural businesses in the past, or agriculture and horticultural uses. These are, for instance, at the last Development Review Board meeting, there was a hemp farm that also wants to have a retail space and sell more than just their products. The state of Vermont, through a change in legislation, has allowed this across the board statewide. We have to allow it. However, they have said in changing that part of the regulation statewide that the towns can review it as a site plan. So agricultural and horticultural uses are still exempt. They're nothing that we can review, but specifically accessory on the farm business, if you go back into the definitions, there's a section that specifically relates it back to that portion of state statute. So it's a very narrow window of what an accessory on the farm business is. And just for what it's worth, the town's always been a lot more permissive in terms of allowing agricultural businesses throughout the community. But this is something new, and we want to be very clear as to what is and how it's regulated.
And was odors on there, was odors part of the supplement?
No.
No, okay,
So what is part of the supplement is clarifying the way that we measure sound.
okay, right,
That's in Appendix C.
okay.
Good.
This is a little bit of everything in terms of housekeeping items that have been waiting for a while, including a couple of rezonings that have been waiting for over a year. So it's a lot to get through, and I appreciate you guys taking the time on this. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
That's it for me.
Good. Anybody else have any questions on that one? No?
That's good.
All right, so I need a vote to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Number 42 is on.
So just a little bit about what next steps are, is I'll inform the select board that you have voted to send them supplement 42. They will schedule a first reading and then a public hearing. As soon as the select board chooses to warn it for a public hearing, it becomes a regulation in effect. So I know that there are people in the audience that are waiting for this to become the regulation in effect. We don't know when that will be. Usually around the first reading, we'll find out. That won't be until January at this point. But stay tuned. And then if the select board approves it, it goes into effect fully 21 days thereafter. So it's a little bit about the process, if anybody has any questions about the process.
All good? All good. All
Okay?
right. So at this point, we have public comments and items not on the agenda. Next up. Not on the agenda.
Getting up at the right time.
I don't know, he might
No,
not be.
no.
Not yet,
time.
not yet, not yet, not yet. Nope, you got one more to go. But you can stand there if you wait for a second, because we're going right to it.
There was somebody standing.
Did you come on up?
My name is Scott Wood. I live here on Blakely Drive, Blakely Road. Just have a question, if anyone can tell me if is there a criteria that the town uses for, say, for voting? If a vote passes by, how many votes does a vote need to pass by before the town will recognize that vote? Is there a criteria that is used?
So are you asking specifically about the planning commission's authority, or?
I'm just asking if anyone knows, say like, for instance, since we're here 9.5 months later, the sewer vote lasts by what, 200 plus votes?
So the planning commission can speak on their authority to approve, for instance, supplements and such. But in terms of, you're asking about ballot votes and things of that nature, I direct your inquiries to the town manager's office
Okay.
But
or
there-
the select board.
There are like 3 or 4 school votes, you know, when the budget doesn't pass. I think Colchester has had a time when they've had, you know, people kept coming back. I mean, sometimes they presented the same budget and sometimes they changed it.
Okay, that was just,
So I don't know if
yeah.
that's the same.
I was just wondering, like, I mean, if a vote wins by more than
Yeah.
200, or I mean,
Yeah,
for elected
No,
officials, if they win by 1 vote, does that count, or
yeah, it's a
20
good
votes?
question. No, it's a good
I mean,
question.
I think that, especially here, like I said, we're here 9.5 months later after a big item was shot down.
Yep,
And it seems like immediately it was rebranded,
Yep.
and that's all we've talked about all year again,
Yeah.
getting ready to gear up on it.
no, it is.
I just want to know if, like, for
So-
the next time, so if it gets shot down by more votes, will they accept it? That's
So the planning commission does not have authority
okay.
to set
I was
things
just
on the
wondering if there
ballot.
was a criteria that
No,
you
no, no,
find
I
online.
just want to let you know a little
Yeah.
bit about what the planning commission does and doesn't do. I think that's helpful, because I think there's maybe a misunderstanding. The planning commission does not have the authority to put things on the ballot or before voters. They can make recommendations to the select board, but that's nothing that they have the authority over. So I think before you comment on things that is completely out of your wheelhouse, what I'd say is please contact the town manager's office or the select board. But I'm your staff person. I'm not qualified to speak to the ballot process without some prep and some research, which I've not done. And I
Like I
can't
say,
provide
feel
you a
for all
thoughtful
of you. I
answer
know
on
that
that.
you were put into this situation not by your own choosing.
I choose to work for the town of Colchester.
I know, but you were tasked, the planning commission was tasked with this unenviable task of rebranding something that people voted down. So I thank you all for your time and for allowing me to come up here and speak, and I will go to other people to ask my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
I just want to say something on that. I would hope that somebody would just state the fact that you only have to win by one vote. I don't think our voting regulations are any different in Colchester than anywhere. I think Pam could speak to that in her election. And I think that the reason that we revote school budgets is the kids have to be at school. And the reason we revote town budgets is you have to have a town budget. And it's in a personal opinion, stepping back for a minute, when you ask the voters, do they want to do something, it isn't like it has to be done. It's not like, I mean, we do need a town budget, and so then you have to come back and sharpen your pencils. And I guess I would say if people vote no on the sewer, you go back and sharpen your pencils, give them the same thing again, unless you want to be defeated again.
Thank you. All set? All right, very good. Moving on. Okay, now we're at the MBI wastewater draft report, and we're reviewing the comments we've got sent to us. And at this time, if you'd like to make a comment, again, we've been through this, as everybody's spoken, quite often, and it's been a long road so far. So we're getting at the end. We'd like to get this moved on to the select board. That was our task, to come up with a final report, which we are just about there, I would say.
I would like to say something at this time. I think we spent a lot of time and energy and research and learning a lot of things that I didn't have much interest in, that I've now become very interested in. My bottom line to myself is I want to see water quality improve in the lake. I don't know how it's all going to get fixed. I know every community that has part of our watershed is doing things to improve the water. You look at every town along the way, they're working on stream banks, they're working on the farms and things like that. And to me, our bay is awful nice, and I'd like to see clean water. And I don't know all the answers, but it seems to me that I put a lot of time and energy, and to have this rehashed again at the last minute is just boggling my mind. We've kind of put some time and energy together, and I understand people have their opinions and want to look at things, but why throw it in our lap at the last minute again when we've kind of looked at it and kind of figured out where we kind of we feel we need to go. It's up to the select board at this point, I think, to kind of, once we put it to them, to figure out where to go from here and what they want to do. To rehash the information we've gone over 23 times again tonight is just kind of making me scratch my head on this wonderful evening.
All right. Thank you. You wanted to make a comment. Stand up. State your name, please. Right to the microphone.
Please have a seat at the table, sir.
Right there. There you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
come have a seat.
Is the mic on, okay?
Yep.
I will obviously be turning my back to somebody, so right now, I'm going to be saying hello to everybody here, but facing the planning commission members.
It's all right, the microphone is amplified throughout the room too, so they'll be able to hear you just fine if you speak forward.
Is this better?
Is it, Mike, are you catching?
Is it on? I don't see anything. Ah, okay, great, thank you so much. I'm Tom Coleman, Dr. Tom Coleman. I've been doing a lot of reading of different reports that are available for the Mallett's Bay IRMP project that has happened over a period of time. A concern really is that I really find the Planning Commission can't really make recommendations for a sewer at this time. That's my conclusion, but I'd like to show you a couple slides here first. They'll hopefully come up.
Which one would you like us to show first? Pie chart?
Okay. This pie graph here is very important for us because we're looking at different sources of E. coli in the bay. Basically, there are two main problems. One is E. coli and the other phosphorus. The runoff projects that have been done by the town are really intended to address phosphorus, getting rid of salt and runoff material. But E. coli is a different story. E. coli could be in runoff, and is. But in the bay, there have been quite a few studies. This is a combination of the 2010 study that was done at University of New Hampshire, as well as subsequent years, 2013 through 2018. This appears in a document that's on file here in the town. You'll notice with the distribution here, and this is just a combination of the whole program, but distribution is that wild birds, 41%, wild animals, 43%. Now the 9% for humans, that's at the high level. So, like say septic or sewer is only going to take care of human problems with E. coli. So if you invest a great deal of funds, let's say 14 million or whatever it turns out to be, for potentially having an impact on the 9%, then how are you going to address the other percentages? Now, I think Jack Scully will be speaking about this in a minute. But there's also contribution, maybe 7% of pets and animals, and then unidentified down here is 35%. The problem there is that the University of New Hampshire ribotyping study didn't evaluate all of the different critters or birds or sources around in our region. They do have data that shows other regions as far as the contributions to the E. coli problem, but nobody's really studied ladybugs and other insects. Now, actually, that's a joking program because you have to have warm-blooded critters to get E. coli. E. coli is dramatically affected by temperature. The warmer the water, the more the colonies grow. UV light is also a factor. So, for instance, in sunshine times, the bacteria are killed off. The recommendation or the potential recommendation by the Planning Commission to the Select Board for a sewer really isn't involving human E. coli. That's at most a 9% factor, and I've seen different pieces of information, a couple of the streams and around in the bay, they couldn't find any. So that 9% is the largest possible percentage of E. coli. So we're spending a lot of time and energy, and when I say we, I mean everybody. The commission members, the community, everybody has spent a lot of time in looking at human E. coli with sewer or a community system. We really need a lot more study in order to give us data that could support going in one direction or another. I don't want to get into the question of going sewer or community system. That's a whole different question in my mind. I'm just looking at the scientific information on E. coli and how to discourage birds or critters. Those two are the highest, of course. How to discourage them from participating in this process. So that this is on record with the town. I think Planning Commission probably also has access to this easily. Could we have the second slide, please?
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh, yes.
Some of
Yeah,
this you
sorry, I
said-
didn't ask for
Yeah,
questions.
Yeah, you said some of this data was compiled. I believe that's what you mentioned. You took different,
Different years.
and did you compile them or did somebody else?
No, I think some of the contributions really were from a member of the town. Some of the data was from the University of New Hampshire. Some of it was from Stone Engineering, and other information came from Endyne. Endyne is the group that does water sampling and analysis of the distribution of the colonies in a particular sample. Does that answer the question?
I just didn't quite understand what you said by compiled. I didn't know if you took different information from different sources and came to these conclusions are yours, or these conclusions are from a study that pulled everything together from a professional who did this for a living. I'm just trying to understand where you said this information was compiled.
I think, in other words, if you could provide the source of the previous slide or this slide?
The previous.
It's unknown with this particular document, which exists with the town, who exactly drew that up.
But
There's
what
a-
document did you take it out of, I think is?
I was trying to figure out the previous one, where you came up with those. You said somebody compiled this information. I didn't know if you took multiple studies and pulled things together yourself.
Just
or-
the source isn't cited on this slide.
Yes.
It looks like this particular study was a report that probably was developed in combination or conversation with different folks from different locations.
So
And
you
I
don't know the
whether
source
they-
of this slide?
Go up 1 second. Do you actually know where this is?
Yeah, I do, Rich.
You just-
This is from the $2 million town EPA study,
Okay,
the integrated water management resource study.
okay, very good. Thank you. So.
But it wasn't the EPA that came up
That's
with
okay.
this.
Yep, we got it. Yep, we paid for that study. Thank
Other
you.
questions, please?
I have a que- I mean, in the IWRMP study, they found different parts of the bay that were highly concentrated with human E. coli. And then there were much lower parts of the bay that had almost no readings of E. coli, but the highest reading was mainly along East Lake Shore and West Lake Shore Drive. So I think you're right about that percentage, but it was an animal, I don't think, along East and West Lake Shore Drive that made that decision. It was human E. coli.
Well, actually, if I could speak to that point, there are two inflow streams that have been highly associated with E. coli counts. Counts, not ribotypes, but counts. That's Crooked Creek and Smith Hollow Creek. So most of the studies have really concentrated on those two areas.
And
But that doesn't mean
Is
that-
that E. coli from animals? Could that be from animals as well as humans,
The
from the streams?
actually the entire bay has been evaluated, but the greatest problems with E. coli are in those two streams. Now,
Which the town has done follow-up work on in its animal, in the
It's
two
animal,
streams.
Right, that's right.
Yep.
Okay, yep.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a point of clarification here and to respect your presentation as well? I was under the impression, and I want to make a statement, that our study was pertaining to the select board tasking us with human wastewater improvements in the bay. We had this conversation very early on. I remember myself asking the question very, very early on about animal E. coli sources. But I just want to say that our task on the Planning Commission was to improve the human wastewater
Absolutely.
Conditions.
Yeah.
Our directive is pretty narrow. Unfortunately, the numbers are probably correct, but again, our task was narrow. There's still confusion on that. Our task is still we have a narrow window to work with of what to do and what we were looking at. That's what our report is really based on. So I don't think the numbers are incorrect. I just don't think those are the numbers that we were tasked to use. We were looking for the best solution without a sewer, using the idea of what we could do with our human problems.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that the numbers we're questioning the numbers as much as that's just not what we were just tasked to take care of.
The understanding that I have is that with option 4, which is the do nothing option or do nothing action.
No action.
In other words, tabling making a specific recommendation to go to either community system or a septic, that table 4 allows that, or I mean, option 4 allows for that.
Allows
But
for
if the,
continuing doing what we're doing as of now.
yeah, so the basic problem is that if human contributions are so low, then why spend all the effort right now? Spend all the effort in deciding which direction to go in, and potentially trying to fund
Correct.
that kind of program that's going to have no effect.
Absolutely. And I understand that, and
Yeah.
and I can agree with that, except that that's for the select board. That wasn't our task, and it still isn't our task. Our task really was to see if you could find a better alternative to that sewer pipe.
Yes.
And we tried. We all were objective in our looking at what was available and what we thought was the best case fix. And as it turns out, the majority thought it should be a sewer. And again, it's the outside of our parameters will always end up at the select board level.
Right.
As the E. coli problem is a whole in the lake, that will end up at the select board level.
Right.
Okay?
So actually, my direction really is to promote option 4
Okay?
with perhaps some more language to clarify what's needed, but not to dwell on doing another vote on a sewer necessarily.
Sure. And again, that vote, this has got nothing to do with the planning commission. As far as the vote,
No, I
to
understand.
go to the vote, that again will be the select board. We had, even though we studied it thoroughly, it was a pretty straightforward directive. So even if we send this to the select board, there's no guarantee, even though there's been a lot of talk of a vote, there's no guarantee of a vote. There's still going to be public input before we'll ever get to another vote. And if we have a group that
Yeah.
wants to,
Quite
vote
under,
no on it again, fantastic. Doesn't want it to go to this vote at all, that will be at the select board's discretion, not ours.
I quite understand that. I also am appreciative that if the Planning Commission was given the task of evaluating this, trying to figure things out, and making a recommendation to the Select Board, I understand they're the action arm, but research, that's what you all have been doing. That's what we all have been doing over a period of many months. So indirectly, I'm speaking to option number 4, but that's not really, I'm just trying to, right now with what I'm introducing, they're just some slides showing some information. It's information only.
Very good.
Is that okay?
Yes, continue on.
Does anyone else have anything? Any questions? Thank you.
Very good.
This is my second slide, which shows phosphorus level. When you talk about contamination of the bay, which really is, you have to look at all factors. Phosphorus runoff happens mostly during rainy times. You can see the yellow highlight there. It's generally much higher with rainy conditions. That's because it's washed away in streams, stream banks. And also then the runoff projects which have been done in the town are trying to help in this regard. The one, I've had a lot of communication by email with Sarah. She's been very helpful in that regard. But it's also my understanding that the runoff projects also have E. coli that's going into those systems. So looking at the whole pattern, are the runoff projects capable of filtering out E. coli or not? So this is a complex topic. It isn't just a quick redo on a sewer or looking at a community system program. It really has to be looked at intensively to try to make the best move for the residents. So at any rate, this is showing quite dramatically that phosphorus is affected by runoff. Now, also, wet conditions, rainy conditions. To mention something else is that the snow melt and runoff in the spring is also a potential problem too, with higher waters, with filling up all of those culverts, the drainage into the bay. Those are times when you're going to have high phosphorus levels. You're also going to have potentially, only potentially, higher E. coli. And the reason for that is that it's cold water. Okay? So those are just pieces of information to tuck under your hats if anybody's wearing one. I don't see anybody with a hat. But to tuck in somewhere in your memory that when you finalize the report to the select board, it's quite important to have all these pieces of information that you can think about for direction. Do you have any questions for me?
Just, have you read the whole IWRMP report?
Yes, but see that there are, this one, yes. There are other documents, like I got a copy from UNH reporting on the EPA study with the ribotyping. I read that. I've read all of, not all, I probably don't know all of them, but at least 4 reports from different years. 2010, 2011, 2013, 13 through 16. This is that report that Jack had identified, its source. But not all of them, like say that came from UNH was signed by a specific gentleman. But this one wasn't signed. I think there's probably several different contributors that applied some pieces of things that they did. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your time, and
Can you do me one
like you.
favor and just state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm Tom Coleman, Dr. Tom Coleman. Wrote a couple articles for the Sun in the last couple months. I'm retired. Unfortunately, I have MS and have trouble balancing, so
I appreciate you coming
I'm
tonight.
okay on a table.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Do you want me to leave this here?
Now we're, again, understanding we have read what you sent us today. So we're up to tune.
I
So would you like us not to project it since you have it in your packets?
well, I would appreciate it if you project it.
I don't mind it if it's projected. We
Yeah,
won't
it's
have
not
to-
very long,
Yeah, we
so
can
I,
make it just for the points that you did.
yeah,
Okay,
yes. No, I'm not adding anything new.
yeah, just,
So I understand what you're saying, and I'm not adding any, I have no new tables. Okay. So, my name is Marilyn Souls, and I want to go over the comments that I wrote on the report. It's not that long, so bear with me, and I welcome any questions that you all have, and I tried to make them specific. We've all been talking long enough, you can imagine I had a lot more to say, but tried to keep it like specific in these comments and speak to them, and I hope that you will consider making some of the adjustments that I recommend. So that's why I'm here.
So these are the same comments that you sent?
These are the same. So, having attended most of the Planning Commission meetings held between late spring and fall, I do appreciate all the time and effort put in by all of those involved, even though I do not agree with the conclusions laid out in this draft report that we're looking at. So here's some brief comments on the specific report. Starting with, in March, right after the voters defeated the sewer proposal, when the Select Board requested the Planning Commission look for alternatives, I was hopeful. I'm like, well, let's see what we can do moving forward. And as the summer progressed, however, I learned that alternatives had subsequently been defined not as all alternatives, but only those alternatives that included all 289 properties included in the recently defeated sewer proposal. That constraint eventually led to this report and your conclusion stating that a $14 million proposal is actually cost efficient. That's online on page 9. It's also listed on page 12, the same thing. That's pretty amazing. I think I've heard it's one of the most expensive, would be one of the most expensive things the town has ever done. It's pretty hard to say that that's cost efficient, that it could only come to that place because of the constraints that was put on things for you all, not able to consider something smaller, which I think that when people were voting on the sewer and were saying, gosh, that's a lot, or whatever reasons they were, that were thinking that alternatives would include, Vermonters thinking creatively and saying, well, could we do this or could we do that? And I think that there was, personally, I think there was fear that you all would cut out West Lakeshore Drive and the commercial properties and the larger properties there, and when they put on 200, all has to do all 289, that kept West Lakeshore Drive in it, and you weren't allowed to consider addressing the camps, which is what I hear you guys talking about all the time. So, point 1. I would suggest removing line 29 on page 1. So you guys have your report in front of you. I made my comments on the one with the lines. I brought the one that now has the pictures in it. So which one, if you're following along, can you guys follow along on the one with the line numbers? Or how do you follow along?
I just went through all your comments and made comments on your comments.
Okay, so, well,
how about that? That works. Ms. Rita can have a discussion with you and
so
she has some specific.
can't we, you guys don't have the report? You don't have your draft report in front of you?
We'll have to go back to that.
Well, I have
I
mine.
have it here.
I mean, because I thought we were just taking out the comments.
Here, somebody can have this one.
We have our draft
We have
report
a
in front
draft
of us.
report.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so which draft report are you guys looking at?
The one with the pictures.
The one with the pictures,
latest
okay.
version.
So that was what I was thinking might have happened. Okay, so let me just try to adjust so we can talk the same, I understand that, so we can talk the same thing? Okay, so on the old report, it was page 1, but it's really easy to find anyway. So it's the executive summary, and you'll see on the executive summary that it states, hold on a minute, I've got it right here. So it's the line starting with the commission has understood its charge to be, wait a minute. Oh, here we are. Okay, so here's your map and your picture, okay? It's on that left column. The commission began this project by reviewing past studies, mentions past studies. The commission has understood its charge to be to identify solutions for the same geographic area and to solicit as much community involvement as possible in identifying solutions. Then there's this, so that fits with what I've, watched you talk about. Then there's the sentence that says, all alternatives were open to consideration. And yet, you guys are all very clear that your charge was not to consider all alternatives, only alternatives that were the same geographic area as the sewer, all 289. So you couldn't consider, what about just the East Lakeshore Drive and Lakefront or something? So I think that is I think that sentence should be removed and just go with all the other things you say, because it's actually not true. All alternatives were not open to consideration. And when I would try to raise that over, to have those things talked about, I would be told, oh, no, we can't consider that. We can only consider all 289. Sarah?
So again, what I wrote in response to that was, given the charge that we had by the select board, which was to look at the 289.
Yeah.
All alternatives could be considered within that charge.
Great. So add that to your sentence. All alternatives that include all. I mean, you guys can word it, but the point is, without saying that within that sentence, so either remove the sentence, and I think that's what my comments are, or add in the sentence all alternatives
Within the charge
that would include all 280 properties, or say all alternatives were
Within this specific portion, within this specific area, all alternatives.
It's basically see, you mentioned 289 properties up above. So the failure on the specific portion of the Inner Bay, 289 properties. So all alternatives, I mean, you guys are the one that, what was it, that all alternatives had to address all 289 properties? And so it was true, you guys considered all alternatives that addressed all the 289 properties. But that sentence can be taken as a quote out of this report. It's not true. It's within what you were tasked to do. It's all alternatives were open to consideration that included all 289 properties or whatever. So either pull it out or use your own wording to define it. I would use that 289 because those were the words that were used the whole time. And the same geographic area is sort of a little bit nebulous, like what does that mean to somebody? And so we all, for months we've been talking about, it's got to address the 289 properties. So I'd just say, put it there, and then it's a true statement. Without that, I can see it, all alternatives were considered. And I'll have to be raising my hand saying, excuse me, but they weren't allowed to consider smaller alternatives. So that's my first point. So any other questions on that?
I just want to say at the beginning of our report that we're presenting, it's stated in there what the charge was with 289 properties.
That sentence is not true. That sentence is not true. You guys were not allowed to consider small alternatives. You were not allowed to consider, and that was, so we weren't allowed to say, what about a little of this and what about a little of that?
I think just to offer what I've heard from the commission is that you looked at all 289 properties because your charge is to address human wastewater in the bay and trying to dissect which ones. I think we spent quite a bit of time reviewing about enforcement mechanisms and the ability for us to be able to parse off what ones specifically might have failed septics or be contributing and without being able to have further tools to be able to go onto private property and find out which specific properties the whole study area needed to be looked at. So
But what-
I
I'm not
think-
arguing, I'm not arguing.
I'm not arguing, I'm just saying, I'm offering information that I think, just,
Correct.
I think that's how
I'm
we
just-
got to those statements.
I'm just saying, I'm not disagreeing with what you guys, I'm just saying, please clarify it. It's one of those sentences that can be very much
to me-
taken
to me,
out.
I'm okay saying all alternatives addressing the 289 properties were open to consideration.
Great, now that's a true statement.
Or even simpler, I would offer within this area, comma, all alternatives were open to consideration, because it implies multiple times in the sentences before that we are charged with that 289 parcel
And
area,
the
so within this
preamble
area.
of how we
But-
came to the planning commission.
It still is, I'm still going to say that the 289 is much more specific and is actually what you got, what has been talked about and talked about and talked about. And so make it clear in your report. All alternatives that include all 289. It's the same
Great.
language you've been using.
Good point.
Okay, so, I don't, you guys talk about things later, right? So I'm just talking about, okay. So thank you for considering that. Point 2, page 3, which is going to be, it's the first paragraph, which was what you guys have. It's the paragraph that starts it's under the subject heading problem statement, and it is the paragraph that starts with, the commission discussed the results. And so it's like the second paragraph, I think. I'm sorry, wait a minute. Oh, no, it's not. It's another page in, that's why I can't see it. So it's page 3 here, so it's going to be, oh, here we are. We're going to go all the way to page, see that, all those pages we got through? We're all the way on page 5. So we're on page 5, and it is the top of page 5, which has the picture of the house and all the people, says, the commission, okay, so wait, where's my comments on that? Wait a minute. Oh, here we are. The commission discussed the results, this is what the report right now says, the draft. The commission discussed the results of the May feedback throughout, wait a minute, what's happening? Oh, here we, so we get down into, the commission had heard at their May 7th meeting about the comprehensive approach that Colchester was taking to water quality improvements, including stormwater and other efforts such as pet waste management and wildlife management efforts. It was evident that very little additional non-human E. coli can be removed despite these efforts. Now, you've just, which you already know because it's been discussed since last winter, that the reports all show that over 90% of the E. coli is actually from birds and wild animals. And you've just said in your report, it's evident that very little additional non-human E. coli can be removed despite these efforts. So the town is making all these efforts on stormwater and all these things, and you guys are saying in your report that that's not going to, have an impact on water quality. So what I say here is, it says very little can be done about non-human E. coli, despite the efforts being made by the town. How do we know this to be so? Like, have we done, which is what we talked about, have we done like specific water quality testing and done that ribotyping and then said, well, we haven't made any progress, or we have made our progress, or we can't make progress with all the other things that the town is doing that, so I say the IWRMP water sampling analysis identified non-human E. coli as over 90% of the E. coli in the water samples. Please state this fact in the report, or state the percentage of human E. coli. Like, put a statement in there, And then in addition, I think that's extremely important, and I think given that we've all known that data, and Tom pointed it out again tonight, and it's in the IWRMP, I think to not state that you guys are working at the 9% and doing what you can it isn't quite as data-driven or factual a report to not acknowledge that. Say, we're working at the 9%, we're doing the best we can at that. So in addition, since the water quality testing lets us know if the actions taken may be having the desired effect, how about acknowledging the potential progress represented in the 2019 water quality data showing no closings of Bayside Beach this summer?
Sarita, you had a comment on that?
I mean, when I was like just thinking about our report, Sarah, is the IWRMP report an addendum to our report, or could it be? Because it answers so many of these questions. It
It's
addresses.
referenced in the report.
Have you guys all read the whole?
It's referenced,
Report?
it's referenced in the report, it's available online.
Yeah.
There's
As
no
long as
need
it's
to make an
referenced-
addendum, it's
So-
it's thousands of
So,
pages.
I guess what I'd say, Sarah, is we've all like read it or read major portions of it, against, like what we might have chosen to do at that time. And so to assume that everybody on the select board or others in the town that are reading this, I mean, it's just a simple fact. It is a simple fact. We're looking to improve water quality. We're looking to, this is not like, somebody shouldn't have to read 600 pages. I think.
But I just think that.
It's one fact, it's one water quality fact in your whole report, and that's all. Maybe you guys don't want to put any water quality facts in your report, and that's your choice, but this is the one that's very specific to all the efforts the town is making at the 90% and the efforts that you guys are talking about with the 9%, and I would say that I would hope you would remove the sentence that says it is evident that very little additional non-human E. coli can be removed despite these efforts. You're saying that the town's efforts can't really have much of an impact. You guys might have a reason that you're saying that I missed at some meeting, but I can't imagine why we think that our best efforts at those things can't have any impact. I just don't think I don't think it's a good thing to say. And then I'd like to point out, we're missing here the progress, like we all care about the lake. Bayside Beach didn't close this summer.
Why though?
Well,
Because it didn't rain this summer.
so
The rain is what, we had very few heavy rains this summer. What puts E. coli into the lake are heavy rains.
That's exactly right. So if it's the rains and it's not the leaking septic, then you're not going to change the number of Bayside Beach closings if you put a $14 million sewer or a $20 million sewer in. It's not going to change your readings on Bayside Beach. It just isn't. It's too small a percentage. And you're right that it's the runoff. And when you read all the data, which I too have read back through, there is some improvement. I'm just saying, let's acknowledge and I know in this report you guys think that asking for more data is asking for delay. It's actually asking for, oh my gosh, so we could sit here and we could say, look at the progress we've made. Like, isn't it great that we know that we didn't close Bayside Beach this summer? Like, aren't we all hoping that some of the things that have been done are going to make a difference next summer also? And you're right that it's when the stormwater's coming in and all those storm drains coming into the beach and things that close the beach. And
So.
Yeah.
got it.
okay, keep going.
So, yeah, we're not.
Stay on focus.
here.
Okay.
So, a lot of the points
okay.
we can discuss, but.
Okay, so I'm just suggesting that you remove that sentence, and I'm pointing out something positive, and also suggesting here that that water testing is being done at the mouth of the streams, and the one that isn't a stream is Bayside Beach. And so when we've been talking for months about doing better water testing, to add in to the good things that we're doing, locations that are not at the stream, so that you have data moving forward, and whatever the town decides to do or not do, we'll know about. Okay, so let's go to the next one quickly. So page 5 is going to be under land conservation. Wait a minute. Yeah. And I say in my comments, it is hard to picture a worse land conservation option than the one considered here. I consider myself an environmentalist, and I love the land conservation that's done around the state. Prior to the March sewer vote, the Town of Colchester website had a whole paragraph about if we defeated the sewer, the only option was to basically purchase all the properties along the lakefront, and which means either purchase them or condemn them. That was the first time I came into the town offices speaking on the sewer vote. I was like horrified at the fear being sold there, that was like, that the town would consider that an option, and wanted to be clear that those opposing the sewer did not think that was a good option, and was told that town staff had talked about it and thought that it should remain, and it was an option. So here it shows up, sewer's defeated, and it's got, you know, it is right to look at the costs, the tax costs and the land costs. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but if you specifically look, I would suggest that at least you acknowledge your neighbors. And so where you talk about 126 parcels, and in considering this, these properties would need to be purchased and conserved over a set period of time. It says, although through consensual purchase if possible, or eminent domain should consensus fail. The way this whole thing was presented, it was so hard when we were discussing it to sit here and think, I wish we had some people that do land conservation in the state, like actually speaking about it. This is, like, we're actually writing here that, that we would kick somebody, we'd use eminent domain. And we're saying that that most of the impacts are to our taxes and our grand list, and not that actually our neighbors won't be able to live in their homes anymore. I'd like you to acknowledge that somewhere in this paragraph, that that's just as bad as the cost.
I just want to say, I don't agree with you the way, what you're saying.
Wait, eminent domain?
I see it differently.
You know what eminent domain is? Eminent domain is that,
I know what
and the
eminent
town's going to be in court forever.
But that's what the report said.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
the report said
you.
that.
You're right.
The report said that we wouldn't do it because of the legal costs and how much time. Did I read that?
Yeah.
No, the report said that your,
Okay.
okay, sorry.
One-
You're right, I'm bad at this, so
So-
I apologize.
So the report, we all have our viewpoints in the report.
Yep.
Very happy to have you get your statement, but walk through that, explain to you what we thought, what she thought, and I think express what we're all thinking.
I didn't get the sense that we were saying we were going to do eminent domain, that we had different options, that there were different options. Eminent domain was one of them. But I don't think anybody felt that that would be a good option because of the legal costs and how much time it would take us up in court. And also, we don't know the houses that have failing systems. So we don't know what houses of those 289.
So that's my point, to include this as if you actually considered it seriously, when you know that it is, and that's my problem with it. That if you, because you weren't allowed to consider something smaller, which is what I say at the end of my comment here. A reasonable approach would follow citizens' recommendation to consider purchasing only properties meeting agreed upon criteria and up for sale. And because you had to look at this whole 289 thing, you made a couple of nice comments about that within it, but the whole analysis of whether land conservation could work had to have that sort of elephant of all those properties over it. And so the analysis is actually looking at, I can't believe we're actually analyzing, taking over 50 years, how many properties was it?
That was done to make it financially viable, and I think, yes, the Planning Commission did take a look at, could you start with something smaller, but I think, again, it gets back to we can do further study, multiple years, more money, but we won't be able to find out which specific properties out of the 289 are polluting, and so therefore the Planning Commission chose to consider all of them, because that was the only way that you could guarantee eradicating the pollution problem that you were charged with.
And so
I think the other thing that I'll just say is, I know that there are other people here to provide comment tonight. You already have these statements in your packets. So I just would encourage you to be brief and speak to something that is not in the packet, if you would.
Okay.
So
I'm going
for fairness for other people.
to finish with, but I'll try to be quicker. Actually, in your analysis, you rule this out because it costs so much. You talk about that. The sewer is the best choice because it's the most cost effective. The sewer only shows up as cost-effective because the other things that you are allowed to consider don't make sense. And so your analysis at the end is this land one is too expensive. Well, of course it's too expensive. You're going to buy all those properties. That's what I'm trying to say. So I won't say any more on it, but that's what, so anyway, I'll move on. Okay, next. Super quickly, so we have the community septic, that's page 7. You guys can find your community septic here. So wait a minute, we're past land conservation options, we're in community septic, which starts in your packet on page 9, and I say, talk about the smells and the sludge, and Jack will speak to that, but basically, that wasn't what I heard from all those people that came and spoke about community systems, and in 2 comments from now, I have one little comment on that. Then we go to page, and what I asked was, how many times a year would sludge be removed? I don't think Sarah had a direct answer for that.
I can't provide that answer.
Okay.
I don't know at this time, though I need further study.
So then you might want to remove from the report that you're concerned about the sludge removal and the smell, not only because we didn't hear from our experts about the smell, that sludge removal smell was a problem, but if you can't put in your report that it's going to be removed once a year, it might be that it has to be removed every month. Something that is removed once a year or once every 2 years is very different than once a month. So maybe you can find that information and just put it in your report. But as it stands now, it sounds like it's a really serious consideration. Based on what facts? I would say if we don't even know how often the sludges are removed, any of us, that's or put an approximation. Most systems have it. It doesn't have to be exact, Okay.
Okay, next.
So then we have page 7, community septic. Is that community septic? Wait a minute. I'm sorry, it's really hard to go between what. Okay, so yes, so we're in community septic. And then that is, Sarah sort of addressed the acres with putting that map in. So I'll move along on that one. It still would be very helpful to say, like, if you guys had information, since you have it in the report, how many acres would a drip dispersal have? And how many acres would the conventional have? Because you're talking about 14 acres for the park, and there might be a way to balance things. So I'm thinking that that is just the kind of information you'd want to put in here. And somebody reading it is like, oh, okay, we'd have like a couple acres left, or we'd have no acres left. That's why I recommend that. Okay, moving on, page 7, line 24 so this is where I'm saying, you're mentioning the word malfunction. So if you look at, page 7, line 24, it's near the chart. And what is being said, I bet you can find it in there. It's the paragraph that starts with, concerns were raised by the commission that the development of a community system on the Bayside Hazel property could conflict with park planning for the site. So that's not what I'm commenting here, but so you can find it. While some systems can allow for general playing fields, on top of the leach field, the presence of system constrained. Anyway, so the next sentence. There were also concerns regarding the chance of malfunction. So I'm speaking of malfunction here, and smells associated with the operation of the system, specifically sludge removal, which I mentioned, negatively impacting the neighborhood. And so I was so impressed that day on July 2nd when we were all learning from Mary Clark. And she talked about the Vermont DEC indirect discharge program, and that they cover anything that handles over 6,500 gallons a day, and there are systems up to 430,000 gallons a day in Vermont. And then she told us, like, where's this? She listed the systems working all over the state, and she said that 7% of the indirect discharge systems in Vermont are in Colchester. And there are 190 community systems in Vermont that are they're working. So I'm going to say, given that information, there were 2 places in the report you talk about this malfunction. And so in the old report, it's page 7, line 24, and page 8, line 32 to 33. And I don't think that that's consistent with what we learned. I think we can have personal concerns. You should always, want something to be running and working. But when you put this in a report for somebody else to read that didn't hear what all of you all said, you all heard, it almost sounds like these are sort of test systems and we're breaking ground and, there are community systems all over the state. I have to say, I was surprised.
There isn't a drip irrigation system to the size of what's proposed here currently functioning in the state.
So just, and what, to talk about a malfunction, if you have a malfunction on a drip irrigation system, what happens?
I don't know, because there isn't one of the size currently functioning in the state.
So you could talk about, because you're also talking about conventional systems in your quotes, you could acknowledge, that, and then it's going to drip. I mean, I don't know what the problem's going to be, but we're not talking piping into the lake. This isn't like a sewer plant. And
It is a plant that would...
It doesn't pipe directly into the lake. It
No,
goes to
but there
leach
will
fields.
be a plant, I think
Yeah,
you...
but no, but it goes, my point is, it's not like, I'm sorry, it's not like the sewer plant, which we're all used to with the, gosh, does it take stormwater flows and the runoff goes directly into the lake, and we've got millions of gallons of sewage that sometimes flows into Lake Champlain from those issues.
The hydrologist was concerned about the flows affecting the bank right on the lake.
He was concerned about the bank
So-
and what was going on in the bank. My point is, you're talking about as if we're going to have malfunctions and polluted water, and I think, I put in what you want, but I think it's pretty strong to put that in there twice, and sludge removal, and you read it, and it's not what I heard from the working systems. Okay, so moving on. Then, page 8 and 9, sewer. Reconsidering what the voters already said no to in March, I consider an insult to the voters. It's not like a town.
That's a good point, but we're going to skip right over.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask, there's a lot of things in here as if the voters were confused, and we have to educate people about what a good idea, whatever we're proposing is, the sewer is, and I would say that, would the town have been considered the voters confused if they voted yes? So why are they considered confused if they voted no?
Very good.
Okay, moving on. Page 9, lines 6 to 9. If you're going to bring in the sewer proposal that was voted no on, and you're going to talk about the local option tax and those kinds of things, so if you find, page 9, line 6 to 9 is, it's the paragraph just before no action. So if you find no action is this picture in your packet. That one.
Those are mostly facts stated, correct?
Okay, and so I want to just find the thing, because I'm suggesting to add one thing in,
Okay.
but I need you to know where it is. So it is 2 paragraphs up from no action, so,
It was a repayment, right? Was
yeah,
it
it's
a
the lot
repayment?
repayment. I'm trying to find, yes, that's exactly right, Sarita. I'm trying to
I
find.
did read your comments and I did make
I
notes on them.
appreciate, first of all, I would like to say I really
No,
appreciate it.
I just want to say that I really did read them. I mean, I don't.
Thank you,
I-
Sarita.
know.
Whether we agree or not on that, I really appreciate that. So what I'm trying to say is that the lot is mentioned, okay? And here it is. It's on the sewer page. It's on the first page with this picture with the map of the sewer. And it's on the top right, second paragraph down. And so if you're going to go into that data about the sewer, as I also said last winter, it's important to say, because it says here, after the lot was repaid by user fees, okay? You guys probably know from my notes, do you know how many years it is? I just saying, put in the facts. It's 50 years. So all the assumptions that the town runs, it's 50 years for the lot to be repaid by
But
the user
that was never
fees.
presented to the planning commission.
It was presented to all the voters in this room last winter multiple times. I checked it multiple times last winter. It even is in what Sarah sent me. It's a 50-year time zone, and it has to do with that if you're only assuming, because it was one of the first things I went in and asked Brian about last winter, if you're only assuming, let's say 2 more houses a year, or if your growth rate that you're assuming is as slow as it is, okay? It gets repaid depending on how fast the development is. So the town's assumptions have to be what their assumption of development is. And the assumption of development, isn't it like 1%? And so you have to do a 1% increase of development. And so the numbers have to be run on what your assumptions are by the town in the report. And I specifically went in and asked Brian, and it's 50 years, okay? And that would get, if the development, what I'm concerned about is much faster, then that will get repaid faster. But all the assumptions in your report is not a faster development. It is actually a 50-year repayback, and I have always found it to not be particularly clarifying to not put that fact out, and I've checked it numerous times. And feel free to check it with Brian Osborne. He can answer that in a second. And see, you're using the same assumptions. That's why I know it's the same. Okay, all your data and all your assumptions. If you're not going to talk about the lot, that's fine. You don't have to put that in. But if you're going to talk about it, it's important to be clear, because you're sort of basically selling. You're selling it here. You're saying this looks good. It's going to be repaid by user fees over 50 years. All I'm asking is you put in over 50 years, because I bet none of you thought it was over 50 years.
Very good.
Okay. So then the next comment, I'm almost at the end, is page 10. And wait a minute. Oh, okay, this is the last comment. That's good for all of us. So this is at the end of the section. It's right before findings and conclusions. So I think it's easiest to find if we go to findings and conclusions and we go back a page. Okay. And then we have, okay, it's this picture here, okay, and it's the top paragraph. It starts with, the cost of inaction is considerable. The Bay will continue to experience frequent unsafe levels of E. coli bacteria and other pathogens, as well as other harmful nutriment loading as a result of failed septic systems. Hold on a minute. As a result of failed septic systems in the identified high-risk area. Okay, so let me just pull that apart again. The Bay will continue to experience frequent unsafe levels of E. coli bacteria. Okay, now we know we're reading the entire E. coli bacteria count whenever we do town water sampling, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's unsafe, it's going to be the human and the animal, right? Okay? So those are that's what closes Bayside Beach, for example. Okay, or that's what makes us think we can't swim it. So the Bay will continue to experience frequent unsafe levels of E. coli bacteria and other pathogens, as well as other harmful nutrient loading, as a result of failed septic systems in the identified high-risk area. So I say there are multiple statements in this sentence that do not match the water quality analysis, including the IWRMP, which Tom showed you. That report states that over 90% of the E. coli bacteria is from birds and wild animals. So how can the small percentage attributed to humans, remember 9% or less, be stated as the cause of unsafe levels of E. coli? It isn't the cause. It can't be the cause. It's too small a percentage. So to say that if you don't do the sewer, so let's just go with the sentence and work with your sentence. The Bay will continue to experience frequent unsafe levels of E. coli bacteria and other pathogens, as well as other harmful nutrient loading as a result of failed septic systems in the identified high-risk area. But they're not the cause. So that to make that statement, your whole report is really based on this. You have to be changing that statement. It's just not true to say that what's only 9% is causing high E. coli readings, because those E. coli readings include the 90% that comes from birds and wild animals. So you can't say that as a cause. You could say it contributes to, but to say that it's the cause just it doesn't pass scientific muster. And so I would suggest that you rework that sentence and recognize more what the IWRM that you are supporting actually actually says about that. And then also, what about the multiple streams coming into the bay as also a possible source of some human E. coli? So the rain events and the things coming down the streams, and once again, you know, that's part of the cause. We know that.
I thought Sarah just said that it was animals. I remember when they did the testing, it was animal.
Oh, because the E. coli readings include the animals. All those E. coli readings include the animals, and so that's right.
That's,
You see?
I'm not even bothering,
Okay.
sorry.
No, but Sarah, it's a really good question. All those, she's right, though they do include the animals, you see? So when we do E. coli readings in town, we're including animal and human, all of those E. coli readings, except for the ribotyping that we've sent to UNH. Okay, so that's why I'm saying to say this just isn't, that isn't true, because it's not acknowledging, like you said, oh, look, we had a storm event and our readings went up. You know, so you're putting this in at this end of the report. You know, you can say, we're going to do what our task is, and we're going to give you a recommendation. But when you put things in here, like now you're pulling on all of our heartstrings, because we all care about the bay. And you're making a statement about the bay, you know, about that I don't think is based on any of the data that you have. And so that's why I continue to say, it is certainly agreed, because you make some great statements in here, like this isn't okay. Right? Not having good water quality and considering that it could get worse. It isn't okay. Your statements about that are great. So I say it's certainly agreed that water quality problems persisting or worsening can have the negative impacts that you mentioned in the report. That's why we have to get this right. I mean, it isn't a delay that we've been talking, you know, for delay reasons, we've been talking all summer about could we do 2019 water quality testing, and could we please do it for 2020? I mean, increased water quality testing, and could we do it for 2020? It actually has to do with, can we get this right? And that's why we should have allocated funds in 2019. That's why we should be doing it in 2020, and we should be moving forward. And we should be making sure that whatever we do, whatever choice the select board makes, I get, you know, that are we doing the measuring where we can say 5 years from now we've made some improvements? Just like I was saying, gosh, we haven't done the sewer yet, but we've been doing a lot of things in the stormwater things, and maybe let's look over the next couple of years. Wouldn't it be just great if things were improving in the bay? And I would say thank you for listening to me.
All right, nope. Food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have just a real quick question.
Would you come up to the microphone, please?
Oh, do I have to?
We like that for you.
Me.
Hi, my name is Sheila Brasso, and I live here in Colchester. My question is, now 9% of the human waste is appearing in the lake. But even though it's 9%, the effect of the human waste, could that be doing more damage than the 41% from the birds and the 43% from the other animals?
That's a good question.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question.
For what it's worth.
All
Yeah.
right, thank you, yeah.
So just say we're using I'm Scott Wood again, Blakely Road. Say we are using the inflated 9%, because you guys, what we were presented last year when we had the vote, it was, I believe, 6 to 8%, correct? Was it roughly? I went out on the UVM Research Festival, the Melisira this year, and they have different, slightly lower numbers than that, but say we'll just use the 9%.
Right.
You get if the sewer goes in, is that 9% going to be like a magic eraser, gone? Can anyone say that for any certainty? That if we spend $15 million, that 9% from humans is just gone, never to be in the lake again. Then we have just the 91% of the non-humans to deal with.
You got it.
Okay.
That's what we're doing.
So but I'm saying that no one can say for a fact though, if we do this, it's going to make a difference, correct?
The report says that. Did you read?
No, but I know, but I'm saying, does it say that,
Yeah.
so it's gonna get rid of the whole 9%?
Yeah.
That's
In
it.
the high areas, where the high areas are.
Okay, so, but that's a certainty.
That's a hope.
Okay,
That's-
a hope and a certainty are two
Yeah, just
completely.
read the report.
You know, I jumped out of airplanes. I always hoped my chute would open. But I carried a reserve
That's right,
every time I went out the door.
correct.
And also, in the just for the, you know, it was said and it was brought up again. Marilyn brought up about the conservation thing. I was just wondering, as part of the town's conservation commission, why we were never once asked to weigh in on any of this stuff
I
this
think it
year.
was, as our discussions go on, we take the best information we have, the facts we have at the time, or how much it would cost to get the job done, or whether it was practical, I think. And
I think
Oh,
just,
the question
let me
was
just
why we weren't
clarify
asked
that, is the
Right.
planning commission didn't specifically invite any other boards, the development review board, the rec board, or whatever
And technically,
boards?
that should have been
How-
the town manager's job. I mean, I believe that is true.
I don't believe
Or the
that was
select
any of the
board.
planning commission's charge.
Okay.
That would be something,
But you all were,
but the entire
were you all
community-
invited to go out on the UVM research vessel in August, the Melisira? Were you all invited? I was under the assumption that everyone in the town, all of you, the planning commission, the select board, and the town manager and his assistant were all invited to go on the UVM research vessel in August. The only person I saw that was here today is Pamela Ranger, but she was part of the Conservation Commission at that time, and we've since lost her to the Select Board.
I didn't know it.
I did not know. No.
Okay, I was just, because that was a very informative trip, and I was just under the assumption that we were told that we were like actually we actually waited at the dock for a while because we were,
Huh.
you know, because we were told all of you were invited and the Select Board and, I mean, we had one person from the active, Jackie Murphy from the active, that's an active Select Board member actually made that. So I was just
Nope.
wondering, okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
all right. Yes. Yes, Jack, come on up. Again, we have read the,
I won't get into that too much.
all right.
I'm accepting the fact that the memorandums that I gave you on the odor issue have not changed any minds at all. The latest draft reads, there were also concerns regarding the chance of malfunction and smells associated with the operation of the system, specifically sludge removal, negatively impacting the neighborhood.
Just-
So.
Is there a picture you'd like us to display, Jack, for you?
Excuse me?
Is there a picture you'd like us to display?
Not
for
on
you?
this one. In just a minute, we'll bring
Okay,
those
so
pictures up, yeah. Thank you, though. I just want to take one more shot at you guys, because Bob is right. You know, you've studied this to death, and you want to get done with it. I don't blame you. It's been a long haul. But the fact of the matter is, this is going to influence that select board. I've run this sentence by many people, and they said, uh-oh, we don't want a community system if there's any danger in there. And I wouldn't want it either. But you guys have got to pay attention to the science and the data. Marilyn brought, I'm not going to go over it all again with you, but the odor issue is bogus. It is bogus, and if you leave it in there, you are doing disservice to the town. And if you want to talk to me on the side, I'd be glad to, and maybe, but you're going to vote tonight, is that correct?
No.
You're not going to vote on this tonight? Okay, all right.
Oh,
So,
that was the next one.
but the point of the matter is that, you know, I did some research on this odor thing because it's not good. We could not have that. So I talked to Cindy Jones, the town administrator in Warren, where some of you got that so-called whiff, and I understand there was a whiff. But it was because they had not changed the charcoal filters on the vents. They're supposed to be changed every year. And as Cindy told me, and then the operator, Nate Fredericks, we just hadn't got around to it when you guys showed up in September. Now, maybe if there's any whiff, those filters should be changed every 6 months or 8 months. But to leave this in there without putting my memorandums in that research, and so then I said, okay, let me go to the state. Let me talk to Brian Harrington, who is taken over, this is the Vermont DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, Indirect Discharge Program Manager. Okay. So he's handling all of these community systems that are over 6,500 gallons per day, you know, and I'm not sure the number, maybe 100, 120 or more. And he said to me, Jack, odor is not a problem. If it is a problem, somebody's not doing their job. And if the town or the administrators don't do it, we'll go in. So he told me that he's only encountered 1 or 2 odors ever coming out of vents at pump stations. So how do you handle that? Well, certainly you don't put your little pump station or your control house right next to, you know, a duplex or a house. You put it somewhere in the middle of that 14 acres. The sludge problem, I talked to fellow Steve Williams, who is the operator down at Thompson's Point. Many of you who were on the tour in September met Steve and Chris Gallipie. He's the engineer that operates the system. So I asked them how often sludge has to be removed. Down at Thompson's Point, it's removed every 3 years. Every 3 years. I don't have the other numbers right in front of me, but I will in a couple of days. Chris is going to give me a list of all systems that are permanent. That, you know, Thompson's Point is summer, but they're big. If you ever take a ride around there, those are mansions down there. So they generate a lot of water and waste, but every 3 years.
Actually, that's not correct. They generate as many wastes as they have bedrooms for. That's how wastewater capacity is not, but except it's not by square footage. It's by bedrooms, and also there's a difference between seasonal and year-round flows, and that is a strictly seasonal system.
I didn't argue that point.
No,
Sarah.
just in terms of, you said that there's a lot of waste and flows. I believe that system was around 20,000 gallons per day or so. And we're looking at something that's over 100, so.
Yeah, if you went to the whole 289, which is not necessary by any remote chance, but we'll talk about that some other day, and we'll talk about it at the select board. But there's no way you need to do 289 units. Should you take the Mungin units and force them to hook up? Bruce Mungin has now 10 waterside houses that have gone up, you know, the mini mansions. Beautiful mound system across the street. The Lefebvres have a mound system across the street at Norris's Corner. There's absolutely no reason to force connection to people that have a compliant system. But again, we'll talk about
The Mungin
this.
system's not fully compliant. That was an older system. It's not under the state wastewater permit, current state wastewater permit. I'm not sure that the Lefebvre one is either. So those are not recently issued permits fully complying with the current EPRs. And with Mungin, I believe not all of those are year-round either.
The ones on the water side are going to be for sale. I've been in there. There's 10 of them. He told me they're fully compliant. You and he can have that argument.
Oh, we are having a dialogue on that.
Okay, all right, we don't have to go there.
Okay, thank you.
But the fact of the matter is, there's no need to connect 280.
No, I just, there have been a lot of misrepresentations tonight, and I just, particularly in matters that, at any rate,
Right, and there's a lot of misrepresentations by the town, and I'll show that in a second. I don't want to take much more of your time, so if you could bring up those pictures, I just want to show you something about the E. coli problem.
Can I also just say, Amy from Stone, I think also confirmed that she was not that concerned about the odors of the system. She said there may be odors with the sludge removal. So I think that's what we focused on, and I read the articles, I read the research that you cited in there. One was about spreading human manure, human waste like manure. That was one of the articles. And then the other article was all the different technologies about, how to prevent odors from sludge, but none of them came out with conclusive finding that this technology would work. They listed, about 12 different technologies that are being researched to address it, but nothing came out conclusive. So I did read those two research pieces that you cited, but I didn't feel like they contributed to the fact that there are ways to guarantee that there aren't odors from.
Well, maybe you should talk, when next time you're in Montpelier, you should go over and talk to Brian Harrington.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, one is the sludge removal, but also one is the slope. I mean, I'm looking at Riverside Ave and what's happening there, and I'm just wondering, you put 100,000 gallons into that slope a day?
You
No.
shouldn't. You mean here at Bayside?
Yeah.
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 I don't think you should ever do that because there's no requirement for 289 dwellings.
Oh, I said, okay, so you're having that argument, okay.
Yeah. All right, can I go on? Can we bring up the first picture? I just wanted to show you this. And we're talking about where is the E. coli coming. This little road here runs right down through the middle of Bayside Park. It is a super highway of runoff and everything else. And if you get to the bottom of that hill, you're on the beach and then into the water. And there have been high E. coli readings there. Again, we haven't specified, in most cases, human or animal, but there is E. coli coming down this hill here. It's an easy fix, something we just haven't done. You break up the road. We suggested that many years ago. Nothing has been done. Next picture, please. You know, you got to establish something to take care of the birds. And I'll grant that this is after the season here, but the Canada geese have been there for, you know, a couple of months now. And you will have E. coli from runoff when you do have these animals allowed to be right above a swim area. Okay, next one. Again, you know, most people are very careful with their boats, but some aren't. And as you can see here, when the gulls get on a boat, you know, and roost there, they will generate an awful lot of droppings and an awful lot of E. coli that goes into the water. So again, there's something that can be done about that. But to say that the E. coli is from the camps and dwellings on East and West Lakeshore, that's not necessarily true. It's a sliver, but it's a very small part. Next one. We've had high E. coli readings. This is a pipe. There are 6 pipes in the beach. 6 pipes that are draining from Bayside into the beach. Why they're still there, I don't know. But I do know that we've had high E. coli readings in the water right below this beach. Putting a sewer in is not going to deal with this. Next one. This is a very large storm drain just east of the beach. Just east of the beach. We've had very high readings there, repeatable high readings of E. coli. Again, we're not sure it's human. It can very well be. But until you deal with this, but then you say, oh, don't worry about it. We've got the Mouse Bay Initiative. We've got our fee. We're collecting $850,000 a year. But with that funding, you can't do a lot. You know, talk to Karen Adams. You can do 1 or 2 big projects a year, and that's it.
Agreed.
But
Again, outside of our.
I understand. But let me just make one point, Rich, and that is this: that we're not a rich town. We're a highly taxed town. If you take $14 million from all these sources, you're not going to be able to tackle these other problems. And there may be human waste in storm drains like this. So if you come up with a solution other than $14 million in a sewer, you might have 4 million or 6 million that you could deal with some of these other sources. It's a multivariable algebra equation. And they told you to just deal with one variable. But at the end of the day, as Bob said, we all want clean water. And that's what I'm afraid of. If we spend too much of the money on just one sliver of the problem, we're not going to get a solution. In fact, we'll have taken a wrong turn, and then it's going to take a long time to get back. That's all I have, and I'm sure you don't have any questions, but
Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Yes.
So Paul Simon, did you read his comments? Did everybody read his comments? I was curious, I mean, we don't need to discuss that now, but that seemed like a new idea, you know, and I didn't know, we don't need to discuss it, but I just thought that was an interesting.
Well, the Planning Commission didn't really look at very specific funding mechanisms, and I think that's what his email was geared about, and that's something that could be passed along.
Yeah, I thought that
Is this
was
previous planning commissioner Paulson?
Yeah,
innovative. It was
not the singer.
a new idea.
All right.
Can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry. I mean, I'm coming from a position as a planning commission member who has no skills or knowledge or anything about hydrology, engineering, water. And I just looked at that report and all the studies that have been done on the bay, and I put my faith into the engineers, the hydrologists, the scientists, the people who have spent their careers studying this issue. And, you know, I just can't imagine how I would contradict them or question them, because I feel like they are the experts. And I felt like our charge was, they came out, they studied the animals. I mean, they studied all the different sources of pollution in the bay, and their recommendation was the sewer. And I think our charge was to see if there were any, to rule in or rule out any other options. And I think all of us approached it with a very open mind, hoping that possibly we could find a less expensive, viable option that would find a solution to this problem. And that's what I want to say. I don't think we can argue about E. coli or animals or anything, because we don't know anything about that, and we have to rely on the experts to advise us and make recommendations.
Absolutely. All right.
Can I just read one more thing?
Yeah.
Just one more thing, okay. So at a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and this is my concern, this is why I'm concerned about the bay. There was a report, an update on the why, what, and how of clean water in Vermont. And on this page it says why we need clean water. It maintains property values. A 2016 study by UVM found a 1 meter drop in water clarity equals 37% depreciation for seasonal home values. It supports tourism. Tourism spends $2.5 billion in Vermont. Lake Champlain is a key attraction for visitors. Poor water quality and negative publicity can impact tourism. For example, a system-wide visitation to Vermont state parks was slightly higher in 2019 than 2018. However, 9 of the 13 parks on Lake Champlain showed a 10% decline from 2018. And 3 of the other 4 parks also showed decline, but not as significant. And this was mainly around the blue-green algae. It wasn't about E. coli, but collectively, Lake Champlain parks lost 21,843 visits from 2018 to 2019, which translates roughly into about $250,000 of lost local spending related to those visits. So my concern for Colchester is the negative publicity about the water quality. And that's why there's an urgency, I think, with all of us to find a solution.
I agree. Very good. Very nice. So for tonight, Sarah?
So what, tonight, I believe, what you had intended before was that the November meeting, on November 19th, when you presented the draft findings, was really for people that wanted to come and provide comment. You had stated that you wanted any comments provided for those that couldn't attend or participate by the 13th. Ms. Sol's comments were provided on the 13th. I included those anyway. You took additional comments tonight. You're due to report out to the select board at their January 14th meeting. You now have one meeting in between now and then. So I need to know a little bit more how to proceed. Do you wish to alter the report? If so, I suggest that you work on that tonight. Instruct me and then have one last pass at your meeting on June, isn't that optimistic thinking? January 6th. And then vote so that you are prepared to present to the select board on the 14th of January. That's, I think I need your help in figuring out where we're at.
Thoughts? I personally, I'll start, how's that? I personally like the report, there's a lot of great comments, a lot of great arguments, but I think you have to pull the trigger on a project after a while. Do the best you can with what you've got at the time. We can move a little tiny pieces around here and there, but we've discussed it and come up, I think, with the best solution in my mind, and the report comes out with the flavor I think it should for me personally.
I completely concur. I think I completely respect the comments that we've heard tonight and what we've received via email, etc. Tonight, I would be very confident to make a motion to move this to select board as is.
I agree 100%. We've spent a lot of time and energy, and again, I think we're ready.
Yep.
I agree.
Mark?
I think folks made some good comments, and we could do some wordsmithing to address some of their concerns. But I don't know, in 10 minutes, how much we're going to get accomplished.
Is this something we can take a look at? And I know Sarah's been taking the notes, kind of reviewing the comments in addition to what we received, and send our comments to Sarah if we have anything else. I think I agree. There might be some tweaking after tonight's meeting that we might want to consider. Just
If
'cause
so,
it's
you
gonna be
really
so
only
public.
have the January meeting to do that. That should be done in public session.
Okay.
Unless it's typos or things of
As I
that
said,
nature.
There is only 10 minutes unless we're going to extend our meeting.
We need to.
If people can stay.
I'd recommend moving quickly if we're going to stay, maybe set a time limit for if we're going to discuss any wordsmithing. Let's start right now. I'd like to propose one change with page 2. I think we talked about it in the beginning with one of the comments presented tonight on the discussion regarding what we were to study in the 289 properties. And I would like to add within this area, and I can pinpoint the actual sentence later, within this area, comma,
Yeah,
all
they're
alternatives were
involved
open to
there.
consideration. I think other items that I have notes on from tonight, including.
Let's see if we can pull up the report. So, within this area, which line are you working on?
I'm on the graphical
Yeah, give me the
one, so
clicker.
it's under executive summary, first paragraph, fifth line from the bottom of the left column. And the existing sentence starts with all alternatives were open to consideration.
And then after consideration, adding in,
Before the sentence, I would put within this area, which refers to what the sentences are above, comma, and then the remaining of the sentence stays the same.
you can pull it up in the pack information online. They go under government and employee session.
I have no other comments on anything else, on some of the things we heard about.
Scroll
The smells associated with the community septic system, I think is an appropriate single sentence within that area that
Agenda.
states that there could be a chance of a malfunction.
Yeah, I
of
think
smells.
that could be tempered, given Mr. Scully's extensive research on it. Just make sure that it's not stated as a fear factor, that, you know, there's a lot of research. I don't know, I mean, I'm drafting on the top of my head, but.
Well, yeah, we have to make sure we capture it in all places.
But I would want the research cited, because the research I read didn't say anything about.
But the sentence doesn't allude that there is going to be
Right.
smells associated. There's a chance of malfunction. To me, a malfunction is an employee not changing a filter to other mechanical malfunctions, which was consistent with other towns.
And how many times sludge needs to be removed
And
from that big a system, how many times with sludge? That would be a good piece of information to put in.
Yeah.
So which page are you on? Is it this page, page 11?
I think, no, it's on 10, from what I was.
Yeah, I still can't find that one, so I can't compare it.
The first one was 2.
Yep, got that.
Okay. And when we were at the larger, I think it was Sugar Bush's wastewater treatment place, I asked about how often the sludge had to get removed, and it was, depends on what we get, how much, this kind of stuff. But it was large, and I
Okay.
kind of looked at him, and
It's page 10.
it was kind of one of those elephant in the room kind of questions. Because it has to go somewhere from there to get disposed of as well.
That sentence right there. There's also concerns about a chance of malfunction. How would you like to consider amending that?
I wouldn't, okay, that's what I was.
I'm good with it.
How would you like to change that?
I'm trying to see where you are, because I can't find the report online here, so I got the old one.
So that sentence, you like where the hands gesturing on the report? There were also concerns regarding the chance of malfunction in smells.
And could we say possibility of smells?
You'd like to add in possibility?
Well, maybe even just taking out negatively, just saying impact in the neighborhood or something. I mean, it's kind of a strong language. It makes it sound like it's going to be a long-term issue, and a malfunction or smell associated with sludge removal is somewhat temporary.
So if you were to make it, there were also concerns regarding the chance of malfunction and smells associated with the operation of the system, period.
Yeah. Take it sounds kind of biased, so that would take out the biased portion of that.
But if you deleted specifically sludge removal negatively impacting the neighborhood,
Yeah, I just don't think that's needed.
you think that's,
I don't think the negatively impacting the neighborhood is needed there. And you could not say specifically, it'd be say, such as sludge removal.
well, if you just took off and just left a chance of malfunction and smells associated with the operation of the system.
Yep, that would work. I thought it was mentioned somewhere else, too. We just have to make sure there's another place in the report that mentions this.
Okay.
Can I just clarify, malfunction would be not expected, but sludge removal would be part of maintenance, right?
Correct.
So sludge removal would need to happen, that's not like a malfunction. But a malfunction would be that it would break and then, okay. just wanted-
It's page 12 also, I think, if you're looking for that,
Thank you.
on the old report.
Just leave it. We'll look and see if there's another place and amend it.
Okay.
I also don't have any public comment. Do you want to finish this up, or,
I think we're fixed, right? From the next one?
you know, restating the charge of the select board to us? You know, if we need to do that. You know, that our role is to kind of find solutions within that charge.
I think that's in the executive summary.
It is in the executive summary. I mean, I just don't mind saying it again.
No, I'm good with that. I think the executive summary is fine, I think. Anything else, no?
No, wait, I'm just trying to figure out what my notes are saying here.
It's the old page 12, line 27 and 28.
Would it be appropriate to make a motion tonight to move this forward to the select board with comments via email to you over the next few days?
That's what she's saying, we really should do it tonight.
Can't.
Well, I think what I was recommending is, I think you had that January meeting that you can officially move it, or you could choose to move it tonight, whichever you want. But anything other than just typos should really be done in a public session.
Right, besides that.
Uh,
And you drafted it.
This one talking about the no action is towards the end, where the discussion about the cost of inaction is considerable. Where the bays continue to experience frequent unsafe levels of E. coli bacteria and other pathogens, as well as other harmful nutrient loading as a result of failed septic systems in the identified risk area. The threat to health and safety impacts, recreation, and enjoyment of our natural resources. It does kind of sound like the whole issue is with human wastewater, and it may not be all wastewater there, so it is contributing to the problem. I don't know how to change that.
So on page 14, that, you want to scroll to it, underneath that image, the paragraph on the right.
Yeah, I don't have the one with the images. I can't get it online for some reason.
So the top of the right-hand column.
Right there, yeah. So it says other harmful nutrient loading as a result of failed septic systems.
Could say should septic systems fail, and then it's not like determined or assumed.
Doesn't everything fail? Doesn't all machinery eventually fail?
We lose some every year.
I guess we could leave it. So I read it again, it reads fine. No, that was it, that's all I highlighted.
Okay. So now we will have a motion.
I would like to make a motion to move this to select board with the edits that we made tonight.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
So just, what I will do is I'll make the changes, I'll have it for you at the January meeting for you to review. once more before your presentation to the select board on the 14th.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you guys. This has been, you have a lot of duties on your plate. I think this supplement was something that's been waiting for over a year, and very patient people that have been waiting for it. And this is something that landed in your laps. It was a little bit unusual. It wasn't regular business, and I just really appreciate the time, care, effort, professionalism that you took in handling this.
Thanks again.
What's our next order of
So,
business?
let's get the minutes. Need a motion for minutes?
I wasn't here, so.
No. Okay, I'll make a motion to
Second?
approve the minutes of last meeting.
You second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 So who made the motion? Sorry, catching up.
Oh, I made the motion.
And who seconded?
Mark.
Okay.
All right. Back information for trees.
Is that where we're at? I can't get to it.
I was recommending that you might want to cancel a January meeting, seeing as how I think your attendance is expected at the January 14th select board meeting.
So you're talking about canceling the January 21st meeting. So we'll have to be here on the 7th.
Right.
Is it the 6th?
Yes. 6.
6th.
6th?
No,
Yes.
no, the 7th.
Is it 7th?
Yeah, Tuesday,
Okay.
the 7th.
Everybody good with that? Yeah, everybody's nodding yes.
So we have to make a motion on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I make a motion that we not have a meeting on January 21st in lieu of a meeting on January 15th with the select board.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I think it's the 14th with the select board.
Yeah.
Didn't I say the 14th?
So you said 50.
Oh, I thought I said 14th. I was thinking 14.
Uh-oh.
There we go. That's it? Good.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in discussion, in favor?
Yeah,
Aye.
let's sign those minutes, though.
Sign those minutes.
Yes.
I can't, I wasn't here.
Right.